They say you never truly know a neighbor until they show you who they really are. For me, that revelation didn't come in whispers at the mailbox or through passive-aggressive HOA notices tucked beneath my door. It came in the sharp hiss of a spray bottle aimed at Ranger, my service dog, as if he were some weed to be cut down instead of the lifeline that keeps me standing. That moment didn't just expose the rot behind a forced smile and a clipboard. It transformed what should have been a mundane HOA squabble into a federal case that ended with handcuffs snapping shut on the very woman who thought she was untouchable. But to understand how it all escalated, you have to know the setting. Cedar Hollow Estates wasn't my dream. It wasn't the cabin in the woods I used to picture when I thought about peace, nor was it the wide-open farmland where silence stretched for miles. It was convenience, close enough to my job, with trails winding through the woods where Ranger could walk beside me without drawing attention. For me, those trails weren't recreation, they were therapy. Ranger isn't a pet. He's a specially trained service animal whose entire purpose is grounding me through spikes of PTSD that claw their way out of the dark corners of my mind. He's my balance, my alarm system, my calm when the storm rises inside. Every time he steps outside, his vest is strapped on, his posture is disciplined, his eyes on me. Federal law recognizes him as more than an animal. He's a medical necessity. That's why the Americans with Disabilities Act is clear. HOAs, landlords, and community rules can't restrict service dogs. But laws written in Washington mean nothing when you move into a neighborhood ruled by someone with a clipboard and an inflated sense of power. Her name was Nadine Mercer, though she insisted people address her as Madam President of the Cedar Hollow HOA. I met her the first tea week I arrived. She introduced herself not like a neighbor welcoming someone to the community, but like a monarch conducting an inspection of newly acquired land. Her gaze wasn't warm, it was calculating. It swept over my front porch, the flowers I had potted, the angle of my blinds, and then it fell on Ranger. Her lips tightened. "I don't recall approving a dog in this community," she said with her chin lifted like she was addressing a child caught sneaking candy. I smiled politely, already bracing myself. "Ranger is a service animal," I explained. "Protected under federal law." She scoffed, a sound halfway between disbelief and contempt. "People abuse that excuse all the time," she muttered, already scribbling something onto her clipboard. That should have been my first red flag, the warning that this woman didn't just misunderstand the law, she believed her authority eclipsed it. The weeks that followed confirmed it. Bright white envelopes began appearing in my mailbox, each stamped with the HOA's official letterhead. At first, they were nuisances. One claimed my grass was an inch too tall. Another insisted my mailbox wasn't the correct shade of black. A third scolded me for leaving my trash can visible from the street for 45 minutes past scheduled pickup. Each one ended the same way, with her looping signature and a smiley face drawn beside it. But the smile didn't look friendly. To me, it was a taunt, a reminder that she was watching, waiting, and daring me to step out of line. I complied with each demand, even though they were ridiculous. I trimmed the grass, repainted the mailbox, and made sure my trash bin disappeared faster than a magician's trick. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I had moved here for peace, not war. But peace doesn't last long when someone decides their personal vendetta is more important than the law. Nadine wasn't finished. She was circling, testing the waters, looking for the battle that would give her the chance to prove she held the real power. That battle came at the next HOA meeting. And in that crowded little clubhouse with neighbors seated shoulder to shoulder, Nadine unveiled a new rule that turned whispers into outright hostility. All animals, including service dogs, must be registered with the board and wear HOA-approved identification tags. She said it like a decree, her voice sharp, her clipboard tapping against her thigh like a judge's gavel. My hand went up immediately. Calm, respectful, but firm. "That's illegal," I said. "Federal protections under the ADA prohibit requirements like that." Her response was a blade in words. "Community standards come first," she snapped, cutting me off. Her eyes narrowed as if I'd just threatened her throne. And that's when I realized something chilling. This wasn't about dogs or rules or even the HOA. It was about control. Nadine had declared war, and she wanted to see if I'd fight back. I didn't know it then, but her whispered threat as we filed out, "If you want to be difficult, I can be difficult too," wasn't a figure of speech. It was a promise. And the next time she showed up, it wouldn't be with paper notices or a pen. It would be with a spray bottle filled with chemicals and a target painted on Ranger. The morning it happened was deceptive in its calmness, the kind of Tuesday that makes you believe life might finally steady itself. The sky was a quiet shade of blue, the air crisp but not biting, and for a moment I let myself think Cedar Hollow might be tolerable after all. Ranger trotted beside me, vest secured, his pace perfectly matched to mine. I remember looking at him, his steady presence anchoring me and thinking, this is why I moved here. The trails, the silence, the promise of normalcy. Then Nadine appeared. She didn't come with her usual clipboard, the one she carried like a weapon of bureaucracy. This time, her hand clutched something different, a spray bottle. At first, my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. Who carries a gardening sprayer down a sidewalk unless they're pulling weeds? But then she saw me, her lips curving into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. It was satisfaction, a predator who'd cornered prey. Rules are rules, she snapped before I could even greet her. This dog isn't approved. I opened my mouth to respond, to remind her once again that federal law stood higher than her clipboard, but the words died on my tongue. Because before I could even blink, she raised that bottle, pointed it at Ranger's face, and squeezed. The sound, psst, was followed by Ranger's cry, a sharp, guttural yelp that ripped me in half. He stumbled, pawing frantically at his muzzle, his eyes squinting, trying to escape the burning sting of whatever chemical she'd unleashed. My body dropped to the ground instantly, hands shaking as I pulled him close, reaching for the bottled water I always carried. My training told me to flush his eyes, my instincts screamed to protect him, and the world narrowed into chaos. You just assaulted a service dog, I shouted, my voice breaking, rage and fear twisting into one. Nadine didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just stood there, arms folded across her chest, smirk painted across her face like a badge of honor. Don't be dramatic, she sneered. It's just deterrent spray. Dogs don't belong in a deed-restricted community. You'll thank me when you move out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't ignorance anymore. It wasn't HOA, then harassment. This was deliberate cruelty, malice dressed up as community standards. And the worst part? She said it in broad daylight, no shame, no hesitation, as if the laws that protect people like me and animals like Ranger were optional guidelines. But here's the thing about me. I might have been trained to endure pain, but I was also trained to document, to report, to fight when the battle matters most. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone, snapping pictures. Ranger's reddened eyes, the droplets still glistening on his vest, and Nadine still clutching the spray bottle like it was some sort of victory trophy. When she realized what I was doing, the mask slipped. She lunged, trying to block the camera, her voice sharp with desperation. You can't film me without permission. That's against HOA bylaws. I laughed bitterly, the sound cracking from the weight of fury inside me. Lady, HOA bylaws don't override federal law, and you just broke it on camera. I didn't hesitate. I called animal control, then the sheriff's office. While Ranger leaned into me, still blinking away the burn, I made sure every second of her cruelty was captured, stored, and ready for anyone in uniform to see. For the first time, I wasn't the one cornered. Nadine was, and she didn't even realize it yet. By the time the deputies arrived, the air felt electric, heavy with tension. Neighbors had started gathering at a distance, drawn by the raised voices, the yelp of Ranger, and Nadine's screeching about community standards. Cedar Hollow had always been a place of whispered gossip, but this was different. This was public. This was undeniable. The officers separated us immediately, one guiding me a few steps back while another approached Nadine. She launched into her performance without missing a beat, arms flailing, voice pitched high like an actress auditioning for a role. This man refuses to follow the rules. That mutt attacked me, and I had no choice but to defend myself. I didn't say a word. Instead, I unlocked my phone, pulled up the video I had captured, and handed it silently to the deputy beside me. He watched. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked from the screen to Nadine, then back again. When the video ended, he drew in a slow breath, turned toward her, and said evenly, "Ma'am, you might want to stop talking." The color drained from her face, the first crack in the porcelain mask of authority she'd worn for weeks. She stammered, her words faltering, but the weight of evidence pressed down heavier than her clipboard ever could. The deputies didn't just write up a report, they called in their supervisor, And suddenly, the self-appointed queen of Cedar Hollow was nothing more than a suspect standing in front of a growing crowd. The supervisor, a calm man with a voice like granite, looked me in the eyes. "Sir, would you like to press charges? Interfering with a service animal is a criminal matter." I didn't hesitate. My voice was steady, sharper than I expected. "Yes, she's been harassing me for weeks. She knew Ranger was a service dog. She did this deliberately." He nodded. Then, in words that seemed to echo through the street, he laid it out for her. Under 18 U.S. Code 1368, it's a federal crime to intentionally injure or attempt to injure a service animal assisting a veteran. On top of that, you're looking at animal cruelty, reckless endangerment, and harassment under the ADA. The crowd of neighbors gasped. Nadine's composure shattered. "You can't arrest me!" she screamed, her voice shaking now. "I'm the president of this HOA!" The supervisor's reply was cold steel. "Ma'am, your title doesn't place you above federal law. You are under arrest." The sound of handcuffs clicking shut was more satisfying than any HOA victory letter she had ever sent. And as they guided her toward the cruiser, her shrieks about community bystanders rang hollow against the reality that for once, the law wasn't on her side. It was on mine. And Ranger, leaning into my leg, seemed to know it too. The image of Nadine being led away in handcuffs burned itself into my memory. But what followed was almost more powerful: the silence. The same neighbors who had once kept their distance, who'd whispered about me bringing a dog into a no-pet community, now stood with phones raised, capturing the fall of the woman who had lorded over them for years. Her shrieks of, "You'll regret this," and "This is unlawful," carried no weight against the steady rhythm of body cams recording every word. For the first time, the balance of power shifted. Cedar Hollow wasn't Nadine's kingdom anymore. As the deputies read out her charges one by one, federal violation for interference with a service animal, animal cruelty, harassment under the ADA, disorderly conduct, Ranger pressed himself closer to me. His eyes were still watery, but his posture was steady, his training shining through. I stroked his fur gently, grounding myself in the same way he had grounded me so many times before. This moment wasn't just about her assault. It was about recognition that my service, my trauma, and my lifeline were valid, and that no self-proclaimed queen of a neighborhood could take that away. Over the next week, the fallout swept through Cedar Hollow like wildfire. News spread quickly, first through the neighborhood group chat, then through local news outlets that picked up the story after the sheriff's office released the arrest report. Headlines blared, "HOA president arrested for assaulting veteran service dog." What had started as a private humiliation for me had become a very public reckoning for her. At the next HOA board meeting, which she obviously didn't attend, the remaining members took an emergency vote. It wasn't even close. Unanimously, they stripped Nadine of her title and barred her from holding any position of authority in the community again. The room felt different. Without her clipboard, without her gavel taps disguised as pen clicks, without her scornful smirks, for the first time the board seemed less like a weapon and more like what it should have been all along, a group of neighbors working together. The neighbors who once avoided me began stopping on the sidewalk, not with glares or gossip, but with nods of respect. A few even apologized quietly, admitting they had been too afraid to stand up to her. Ranger, always calm, accepted their tentative pats on the head like he'd known this day was coming. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in the soft way the community shifted, in the realization that one person's arrogance didn't outweigh federal law, and in the knowledge that my voice, and Ranger's presence, had been enough to tip the scales. I still walk those trails with him every morning. His vest is always on, his steps always steady. And every time we pass the clubhouse where Nadine once declared her rules, I remember the look on her face when the deputy told her the truth. No title, no clipboard, no made-up bylaw can place you above the law of this country. Ranger and I don't need Cedar Hollow's approval. We never did. But now, when we walk past our neighbors, we walk with our heads high, not just because we stood our ground, but because we proved something bigger. That no bully, no HOA president, no Karen with a clipboard can strip away the dignity and protections that were earned in blood, service, and sacrifice. And that, in the end, was the victory neither Nadine nor her spray bottle could ever erase.